Hi, VencoreWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday, November 14th. I'd like to spend a few minutes on an atmospheric weather pattern I often refer to as high-latitude blocking. This can be quite an important feature for the wintertime weather conditions here in the northeast U.S. and indeed looks like we're setting up for a high-latitude blocking pattern to begin this upcoming weekend and continue right through Thanksgiving week. In fact, it looks like the rest of the month of November will be quite a bit colder than normal in much of the eastern U.S., largely due to this high latitude blocking pattern that will be setting up. Basically, when you have a high latitude blocking scenario, you have abnormally high pressure over high latitude places such as northern Canada, Greenland, or Iceland. In turn, that typically allows for cold air outbreaks to come from northern Canada into the central and eastern U.S. And not only can you get cold air outbreaks with a high latitude blocking pattern, but you can get sustained cold air outbreaks. And that is crucial for the northeast U.S. in terms of potential for snow. For example, in the big cities in the I-95 corridor, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, you need all kinds of things to come together for a snowstorm. Not only do you obviously need cold air in place, but you really need sustained cold air, reinforcing cold air masses this time of the year for a good snowstorm in the I-95 corridor. If you don't have a blocking pattern, oftentimes cold air will lift out quickly. You might have a coastal storm that begins as snow, but it could quickly change over to rain. So snow lovers often hope for high latitude blocking patterns to set up, and indeed it looks like we will be featuring high latitude blocking but beginning this weekend. This happens to be the forecast map from the 06Z ensemble run of the GFS model for Sunday night. And this is this upcoming weekend, Sunday night, the very beginning part of Thanksgiving week, and it is really showing a high latitude blocking signal. Specifically, this orange area right here represents abnormally high heights over northern Canada and Greenland. It's very strong high pressure for this time of the year situated in this region as predicted by the GEFS model for Sunday night. A blocking pattern. Notice also it's often correlated with upper level trough over the east coast and another one just off the west coast, and a very abnormally high pressure sitting just to the west of Alaska. So lots of players on the field. Basically a relatively slow moving or even a stationary pattern. That's why we call it a blocking pattern. So once this sets up, you can get cold air into the northeastern part of the country, and that cold air can stick around. Indeed, it looks like we have an Arctic blast coming this weekend. By the time Sunday rolls around, we'll be in the second Arctic blast of the month of November. And because of this blocking pattern, it looks like the cold will stick around right through Thanksgiving week. And again, I think pretty much the rest of the month of November looks like it'll be colder than normal in much of the eastern U.S. There are even signs that there could be some snow associated with this deep upper level trough later next week, the middle part of next week, Wednesday or Thursday. Of course, Thursday next week is Thanksgiving Day, so we'll monitor that closely over the next several days. But again, the forecast here is for very strong high pressure to form in the upper part of the atmosphere over northern Canada and Greenland by the end of the weekend. This is associated with the beginning of that real cold spell here in the northeast U.S. Let's now move forward here on this particular forecast map. And notice the red or orange area sticks around, doesn't move, as does the deep upper level trough over the eastern U.S. It basically sticks around and doesn't move during Thanksgiving week. Here we are now into the middle part of next week. Still a blocking pattern with abnormally high heights over northern Canada, southern Greenland. Again, it kind of prevents the cold air from lifting out here, and this deep upper level trough just sits over the eastern U.S. We're moving forward now right into Thanksgiving Day next Thursday. Still abnormally high heights over the high latitudes of northern Canada, Greenland, and upper level trough sits right over the eastern U.S. And here we are into the Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. Still a blocking pattern and, with high heights over northern Canada and Greenland, and a deep upper level trough over the eastern U.S. Well, one of the tasks for a weather forecaster when putting out a winter outlook is to try to determine whether or not high latitude blocking events have a high probability for the upcoming winter season. And we talked extensively in the winter outlook, the 2017-2018 winter outlook, which is available on the weather website, about the fairly good prospects for high latitude blocking events of this upcoming winter season, beginning right now. And again, it looks like we'll have a high latitude blocking event beginning this weekend right through Thanksgiving week. One of the signals to look at during the fall season, believe it or not, is related to the sun. It has been shown that in years with low solar activity, such as we are in right now, there is a likelihood, a better chance for high latitude blocking events. So again, the sun plays a crucial role, of course, in all of weather and climate, but it actually has a specific impact on high latitude blocking events. This happens to be a 500 millibar height anomaly chart for several years with low solar activity, basically during the solar minimum phase of the 11-year solar cycle. And we are absolutely in a low solar cycle time period right now. Not only are we headed towards the next solar minimum, which should be reached within a year or two, but we are in the middle of a historically weak solar cycle to begin with. So one thing we can be fairly certain about is that we'll have low solar activity during the upcoming winter season. Look at this signal that comes from all of these years, the composite map or the average of all these low solar activity years. There is a clear high latitude blocking type of signal here shown on this particular map in yellow and orange. Higher heights than normal right over Greenland and below normal heights throughout much of the northern U.S. and into the northeastern U.S. specifically. So again, low solar activity typically favors a more frequent high latitude blocking pattern in the winter. And again, we talked extensively about this particular signal in our winter outlook. Well, another signal that we talked about in the winter outlook with respect to the likelihood of high latitude blocking deals with what meteorologists refer to as indices, oscillation indices, specifically in this case the Arctic Oscillation Index and the North Atlantic Oscillation Index. Basically, when both of these indices fall into negative territory, there is a better chance for a high latitude blocking event. The red on these particular plots indicate model forecasts for, in this case, the AO, the Arctic Oscillation Index on the top, and the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation Index on the bottom. The Arctic Oscillation Index basically is a reflection of the temperature and pressure pattern over the Arctic region, and the North Atlantic, pressure and temperature pattern over the North Atlantic. And again, when both of these fall into negative territory, that there's a better likelihood for high latitude blocking. And indeed, the forecast for both the Arctic Oscillation, as it drops down right here into negative territory, and the NAO falls right here into negative territory over the next week or two, is supporting evidence for high latitude blocking. Indeed, it looks like high latitude blocking sets up this weekend, sticks around all of next week, which is, of course, Thanksgiving week. Well, how does all of this translate to the weather conditions expected here this weekend and next week here in the northeastern U.S.? Let's jump ahead now to Saturday morning's forecast map of 850 millibars. This is the lower part of the atmosphere, the temperature anomalies. Again, keeping in mind that we have a high latitude blocking scenario setting up. This is reflective of much colder than normal air over the northern plains come Saturday morning. Ahead of an Arctic frontal system, we are warmer than normal here in the northeast U.S., indicated on this particular map in red and orange. By the way, all of these maps available from tropicaltidbits.com. As we move forward, that Arctic blast moves in Probably a frontal passage here in the I-95 corridor Saturday night. And the colder air certainly will be felt on Sunday. Likelihood for some strong northwest winds as well. Now let's just keep moving forward in 6-hour increments to see what happens in the northeast U.S. Again, keeping in mind the high latitude blocking scenario that will not allow the cold air to lift out completely here. And as we're moving forward here now, Monday afternoon, still quite cold in the northeast U.S. relative to normal. Tuesday now, still colder than normal along the east coast here. Now we're moving into Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and a little bit of moderation, but still basically below normal in the northeast U.S. And given the fact that the high latitude blocking pattern, which allows for sustained cold air and multiple cold air outbreaks, it's not too surprising to see that by Thursday another cold air mass is headed into the eastern U.S. This is Thursday afternoon forecast map, Turkey Day of next week. And again, high latitude blocking allows for multiple cold air masses and not much moderation in between here. So it looks like it stays cold on Thanksgiving Day. Now we're into the Friday after Thanksgiving, and it just stays cold right through next week. This is actually into the early part of the following week on Monday, November 27th. So again, high latitude blocking sets up this weekend, sticks around. That's why it's called a blocking pattern, and allows for cold air to stick in the eastern U.S. not only this weekend, but right through next week, and probably right towards the end of the month of November. Well, one final set of charts I'd like to show here, the surface forecast maps from the 6Z GFS model run. Again, we're jumping ahead to Saturday morning's forecast map here. We'll be ahead of the Arctic front here in the northeast U.S., a little bit milder on Saturday, perhaps some shower activity. Then that front charges south and east across the Great Lakes. Some rain shower activity, very likely late Saturday night with that frontal boundary zone. And then by Sunday morning, we are in the Arctic air, strong northwest winds. And notice here these snow bands represented on this particular map in blue. This looks like this will be quite a lake effect event here, with lots of snow bands over the Great Lakes and in those higher elevations well to the north and west of the I-95 corridor. This time of the year, when you have cold Arctic air moving over the still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes, you destabilize the lower part of the atmosphere, and the end result, snow showers, snow squalls, could be a very impressive lake event, a lake effect event here this weekend. And don't be surprised if some snow shower activity makes it past the mountains into the I-95 corridor. Now let's keep moving ahead here with that blocking pattern in mind here. We have cold air not only into the early part of next week, but it basically sticks around right through the middle part of the week. A little bit of moderation before yet another Arctic blast arrives in the eastern U.S. in the middle part of next week, Wednesday, Thursday time frame. There is the possibility that a storm will form along that frontal boundary zone. That is still in the speculation stage. If that happens, there could even be some snow into the I-95 corridor. That is certainly speculation stage at this point. But the bottom line here is high latitude blocking pattern will allow for the possibility of not only cold air to be sustained in the northeast U.S., but even perhaps the possibility of some snow. Now, high latitude blocking by itself will not produce snow in the northeast U.S. There is still one big negative factor for snow this time of the year, and that is the fact that the Atlantic Ocean just to the east is still relatively warm, certainly much warmer than it will be in January or February. That is always an inhibiting factor for snow. However, high latitude blocking pattern sets up this week and allows for cold air to move into the northeast U.S. and stick around right through next week, and indeed perhaps right into the end of the month of November. Snow is on the table in this type of pattern even in the month of November. That's it for now. For VencoreWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.